All right, we're going to be solving and graphing inequalities and compound inequalities. We're going to do 8 problems together. You need to have those on your piece of paper that you're going to turn in, and at the end I will give you 4 problems to do on your own. Okay, so grab your piece of notebook paper and title it Solving and Graphing Inequalities and Compound Inequalities. Please put the standard on for me and put your name and the period number up here. Now, if you want a little more practice with this, if you didn't feel like this video covered everything that you need, you can go to Math Nation videos, section 2, topics 5, 6, and 7 have to do with this information, okay? So make sure you use those Math Nation books. All right, so let's go ahead and solve these. So remember, it's solving and graphing, okay? So just like when we do equations, we're going to always go ahead and write that little line down our equal sign or inequality sign, okay? So first thing we want to do is simplify both sides of, in this case, the inequality. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute the -4 out, which means I'm going to just drop down the 6, and -4 times 6 is -24n, and -4 times 7 is a -28, and that's going to be greater than or equal to 110. Now I'm going to go ahead and combine my like terms, so I can combine this term with this term, and I'm going to write it in standard form here, so -24n, and I have more negatives than positives. It looks like we have 22 more negatives. That's greater than or equal to 110. Now I'm going to go ahead and add 22 to both sides. I love when you use the notebook paper lines, but it looks like I'm going to run into my question too since I pre-wrote them out, so I'm going to write a little bit smaller here. -24n is going to be greater than or equal to, add these up, we have 2, 3, 132. So now I'm just going to get n by itself by dividing it by a -24. And since I'm dividing by a negative, remember, whenever you multiply or divide by a negative, the sign is going to flip. So let's make sure we flip that before we forget. And that, a negative and a positive, is going to give me a negative, and I'm going to just go ahead and guess and check over here. 24, let's see, I'm going to guess that goes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to guess 6 times. I'm sort of wondering if this is even going to go in evenly. It doesn't look like it will, does it? I think it does, so. Okay, 6 times 4 is 24. 6, 12, 13, 14. Okay, that was too many. 5 times 4 is 25. That's 220. I just want to look and see if I did some of this math wrong, because I don't remember it being a fraction, but maybe it was. Let me just make sure I didn't do something silly here. Nope, indeed. Okay, just doesn't work out. All right, so since it doesn't go in evenly, we're going to end up with a fraction, but we do want to put this in simplest form. So I notice that both of these are divisible by 2 because they're both even numbers. So 24 cut in half is going to give me 12, and 132 cut in half is going to be, let's see, half of 12 is 6, and half of 12 is 6. So that will be 66, and I can cut both of those in half again. So that will give me 33, and half of 12 is 6. So in the end, I'm going to have 33 over 6, and that's going to be my end answer. However, it says, and graphing. So let's not forget to graph this, because if you forget to graph this, you're not going to get it marked correctly, okay? So when it comes to this, I would like you to just go ahead and put a line in the middle. Because it's a fraction, I have you do it a little different. So 33 over 6. So I now have to think a little bit. Okay, 6 times 5 is 30, and 6 times 6 is 36. So this is going to fall between -5 and -6. So I'm going to put -6 and -5. So I just want those little marks there so I can see where it falls between whenever you have a fraction, okay? Now, this is less than or equal to, so it can equal this. So remember, we start off with our circle, but since it includes this point, we color it in, so that's a closed circle, and it's anything that is less than that, and all the smaller numbers are right over here to the left-hand side. Another way you can remember that is just draw an arrow here, and you see that the arrow pointed to the left. So that's how we should color it in our graph. Okay, for the next one here. Fractions. Oh, I know how much you guys all love fractions. So, this is already in simplest form. This is already in simplest form, but we have to move the x's together. We're going to move those to the left. Remember, to the left, just like the song says. So I'm going to subtract 1/2 x from both sides. Now there's nothing that says you have to do this in your head. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to solve this over here. I have 2/3 minus 1/2. I don't need to worry about the x's because the x is going to come on down. When we add or subtract fractions, we have to have a common denominator. So I'm going to change both of those fractions to have the common denominator of 6 because that is the lowest common denominator. So 3 times 2 is 6. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. And again, 2 times 3 is 6. And so I'm going to multiply both by 3 this time, and I have 3. Now I notice that this is the highest. This is the largest fraction. So I'm going to end up with more positives than negatives. So we need to remember now we're combining like terms because I actually have an x here and an x here. So how many more do I have? Since they're opposites, we will subtract, so that will be 1/6. So I have a positive 1/6 x. All right. Now, we're going to add 8. Add our 8 down, and we have, on this side, we just have the -1/4 left. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and subtract my 8 from both sides, and I have 1/6 x, and over here I have both negatives. So how many negatives? Well, 8 plus 1/4 is just going to be 8 and 1/4. But at this point, it's going to be easier if I change this into an improper fraction. So I'm going to just change that, keep my 4 on the bottom. 8 times 4 is 32, plus 1 more is 33, and it's still going to be negative. All right, so I want x to be by itself, so I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So 6 will go on the top, 1 will go on the bottom. So the 1 divided by 1 is 1, 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 1 times 1 is 1. So we are left with 1x. And that will be less than, and so over here I have to also multiply by 6, and since it's a fraction, I'm going to make it look like a fraction too. I like to simplify beforehand, so both 6 and 4 are even. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. I'm done simplifying, so a negative times a positive is a negative, and 33 times 3 is 99, and all of that is over 2. So it looks like our end answer is -99 over 2. All right. going ahead and boxing that. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to graph it. And I have negative 99 over 2. I'm just looking at my work here because before I ended up with a positive, and I think I did something wrong earlier. I just want to make sure. Yeah, I did something wrong earlier. Okay. So again, I want to have two whole numbers since this is a fraction, so let's think about this. Have a negative number here and a negative number here. 2 goes into 100 50 times. And so this is gonna, it's not 100, so it's gonna fall between 50 and 49, and negative 50 is smaller than negative 49. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. It does not include this number. It says it has to be less than this number, but it doesn't include it. So there we have our open circle. And again, you can draw that arrow. Anything that is smaller is going to go to the left. And there we've got our graph, okay? All right, let's do a few more. Draw our line. So just like with equations, we follow the same steps. The only thing that's ever different is if we're multiplying or dividing by negative, we have to remember to flip the sign. So we're going to have 25, and we're going to distribute our negative 3. So negative 3n plus 6 is greater than or equal to negative 8n plus 6. And I notice that I have two like terms that I can combine. So we have negative 3n, and that will be plus 31 is greater than or equal to negative 8n plus 6. All right, next step is getting all the variables that we're solving for on one side. So since I have n's over here and here, we're going to CRAL them all to the left. So I'm going to add 8n to both sides. And over here, more positives than negatives. It looks like we have 5 more positives. And that will still be a greater than or equal to, and over here we just have the 6 left over. So let's go ahead and start isolating our n. So let's move this away. So we'll take 31 away from both sides. And we have 5n is greater than or equal to, I have more negatives than positives, so that's going to leave us with 25. Because I do like to skip our lines and I didn't leave enough room, I'm going to rewrite it up here. All right, so now I just need to divide both sides by 5. Because it's a positive 5, I don't have to flip the signs. So over here we have a negative 5 left. So let's go ahead and graph this. Since that's a whole number, that makes it nice and easy. All we have to do is have a negative 5. Now it says that it's greater than or equal to, so we start out with our open circle, but since it equals 5, we're going to go ahead and color that in. And it's, make an arrow here, it's everything to the right. So those are all the numbers larger than negative 5. Here we go. So both sides are already simplified for us, but I have x's on both sides, so let's move them all to the left. So negative 3x and negative 3x. So we have negative 5x plus 6 is greater than, these will be 0, so that cancels out. We just have our negative 34. So now we just want to isolate our variable. So subtract 6 from both sides, and we have negative 5x is greater than negative 40. Now the opposite of multiplying by negative 5 is going to be dividing by negative 5. Did you hear that? I said divide by negative. That means flip the sign. Do that before you forget, okay? So this leaves us with 1x over here, and a negative will be a positive, and 40 divided by 5 is 8. And we and you do know I like these boxed, right? All right, and now let's go ahead and just make our graph. And again, it's a whole number, so we'll just put an 8 here. It does not equal 8. So 8 is an open circle, and it's anything that is less than 8. So everything right as close as it can get to 8, but it cannot include the 8. Okay, so we're going to go on to solving some compound inequalities now. So you're going to notice that with this one, we have 2 inequality signs. This is the same as saying an and. Okay, we talked about ands and ors. Ors, it can be one or the other, and it has to work for both. Okay, so just like if this were on its own, I'm looking at both sides are simplified. If this were on its own, both sides are simplified. So we just want to solve for n. So if I had just this, wouldn't I subtract 10 from both sides? Well, I have this also. So again, if I subtract 10 from here, I have to subtract 10 from here. So really, this is just doing 2 problems all in one, okay? So it's not both sides, now it's all 3. So over here we have negative 11, and we're subtracting, so we don't have to flip the sign, not when we subtract, just when we multiply or divide by a negative. And here we're left with n, and over here we have more positives and negatives and 2 more. And n is by itself, so we are done. All we have to do is graph it. Now you always want to read this from n's point of view. So we're going to start off with 2 numbers on our number line. We have 2 numbers here, and I want to put the smallest one to the left because that's how it would appear on the number line. So negative 11 and 2. So let's go ahead and read this from n's point of view. It says n is greater than negative 11. So it does not include negative 11. It's greater, and I should write this up on top. N is going to be greater than negative 11. Now if you want to, you can rewrite this one little portion, flipping it around, and that would be n is greater than negative 11, okay? So that means it's going to include everything that is larger than negative 11. Now, let's go ahead and look at this one. So it says n is less than 2, so it does not include 2, so that's an open circle, but it is anything that's less than 2. But because there's an and, remember if mom and dad say something like, you have to clean your room and do the dishes, it doesn't mean you get to choose one, it means you have to do both of them. So the only answers that apply here are where both of them overlap. So at this point, it works for the second equation, it didn't work for the first equation, so we have an open circle. At this point, it worked for the first equation, but not for the second equation. So again, we have an open circle. But everything in between worked for both of the equations. So we have to color this in. Okay, so it includes all the area inside here up to these points, but not including those points. Okay, now over here we have an or statement. An or means you can choose one or the other. So if they say you have to clean your room or do the dishes, now you only have to pick one of them. You don't have to do both of them, okay? So it's going to be graphed differently. Okay, both sides are simplified, so I'm going to go ahead and move my 3 over. We have negative 10b is less than or equal to negative 40. Just going to divide both sides by negative 10, and that will leave us with b. Oops, divide by a negative. I almost didn't catch it, you guys. That means flip the sign. So it's now greater than or equal to, and a negative and negative will be positive. 40 divided by 10 is 4. All right, now let's solve this graph. So all my variables are on one side. I'm set to go ahead and solve. Okay, so plus 10 plus 10. We have 3b is less than or equal to, and that will be negative 13. Okay, and then we're going to divide both sides by 3. So we end up with b is less than or equal to, and I can't do anything with this fraction. It's in simplest form as it is, so I'm just going to write it down as it is. Sorry for the pause, I just wanted to look and see something. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and graph this as it is. This number is going to be smaller, so we have negative 13 over 3, and we have a 4 over here. Now, I'm not going to be concerned with the numbers on both sides at this point. If we want to write them, let's see. What would that be? 3 goes into 12 4 times, so this is between 4 and 5, so that will be negative 5 and negative 4. All right. I'm going to graph this one first. B is greater than or equal to 4. So I'm going to go to 4. Open circle means it doesn't include 4, but this has the equal sign, so it equals 4, or it's anything larger than 4. Now over here, it says that I'm going to go make my open circle, but it says it can also equal this, so I'm going to color that in, or it says it's anything smaller, anything less than this. So it's going to be everything to the left-hand side. And since it's an or statement, any answer in here or any answer in here works, and that's why they're both on the graph, okay? Remember up here, this is the answer right here. This was just showing your work, okay? Okay, and last two, you guys. So again, we look here and we see this is an and statement. Sometimes the and statements, they're broken into two. Sometimes they're put together like this. So I'm going to start out. My x's are all in one spot, everything's simplified, so we're going to go ahead and add 2 to each expression here. So over here we'll have 0 is less than or equal to 3x, which is less than 12. Now I'm going to divide each thing by 3. 0 divided by 3 is 0, which is less than or equal to x, which is less than 4. And this would be read, x is greater than or equal to 0, x is less than 4. So both of those conditions have to work. So 0 is smaller than 4, so we'll put this here and put this here. Now every once in a while this will end up being the smaller number, so you make sure you look to see which one's smaller so we get them on our number line correctly. Okay, since it's an or statement, I'm going to do both of them separately first. Okay, so let's start out with this one. I'm going to the 0, and I'm going to put my circle, but it says it equals 0, so I'll color that in, or it says x is anything larger. Now I just read it from x's point of view, so x is larger than or equal to 0. If you need to, you swap this around, and you put the x here, the 0 here, but you need to remember, if you flip these, you also have to flip the sign. Okay, so x is larger than 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and graph this one, and I'm going to go to the 4, and I'm not going to color it in because it's not equal to 4, but it's anything less than, so I'm going to go this way this time. Okay, since it's an and, it has to apply to both of them. So let's see, I'm going to look at both of these endpoints here. This worked for the first equation and the second equation, so I can make a closed circle, and over here this worked for the first equation, but it does not work for the second equation, so that's an open circle. Now everything in between works for both of them, so we will color in what's in between, and this is our final answer. Again, this is only showing the work, okay? And then we go to the bottom, we have an or statement. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. We have 3x is less than negative 21. Divide by 3. So x will be less than negative 7. And let's go ahead and do this one. So I'm just looking to see if I have to clean anything up, which I don't. X's are on one side, so I'm going to go ahead and add 18 to both sides, and we have negative 5x is less than or equal to, more positives and negatives, 5 more positives. Now I'm going to divide by a negative 5 because that's the opposite of multiplying by negative 5. Negative, did you hear it? Divide by a negative. So we are going to go ahead and switch our signs, and so that will be x is greater than or equal to, and that will be negative 1. Okay, now I need to graph both of those, but it goes on one graph. Negative 7 is less than negative 1, so I'll put negative 7 here, negative 1 here. Let me go ahead and graph this one first. So x, I'm going to go to the negative 7, start with an open circle, and it does not equal, so it will stay open. And x is anything that is less than. So I'm going to do it to the left-hand side. And over here, go to my negative 1, make an open circle, but it says it's equal to that, so I will color my circle in, and it says it's anything greater than this. So there we have it, you guys. Now, what you need to do to show me that you understand this content is complete these 4 on your own. So remember, all of the notes that you just took with me, solving all of those problems, and these 4 problems will have to be turned in to the bin when you come into class.